So we have a bombshell story here coming out of Washington. Attorney General Loretta Lynch accused the state of North Carolina of, quote, state-sponsored discrimination against transgenders. And this, of course, is as a result of their new bathroom law. So Raw Story explains here. She also warned that the federal government could curtail federal funding for North Carolina if the state continued to enforce the law. She noted that the Justice Department had sent a letter to North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory warning that the law violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, but, quote, instead of replying, North Carolina and its governor chose to respond by suing. Thus, we are filing a civil rights lawsuit against North Carolina. Okay, so that's huge news. Understand what happened there. You have the federal government sending a letter to North Carolina, hey, look, we're just saying if you continue enforcing this discriminatory law, we are going to withhold funding that you get from the federal government, and you're not going to like that. So instead of responding to that, they just sue them. Okay, we're going to sue you now. So then the federal government goes, okay, we're going to sue you too. So suit, countersuit, like that. And what's at stake here? Listen to this, quote, more than $800 million in federally backed loans for public universities are at risk if North Carolina refuses to comply with the federal government, according to the Associated Press. The University of North Carolina system could lose more than $1.4 billion in federal funding. All right, so what we're seeing here is basically the next step in the civil rights battle. Because this is what it's been all along. Obviously, first the South had slavery, and the North said, fuck that. We had a war over it, and we know how that ended up. Then you had Jim Crow and segregation in the South. And then again, the North had to step in and say, no, we're done here. Now you gotta integrate. No more segregation. And there was obviously this massive fight, and there were lawsuits over it, and it went on. And then again, we know who ended up winning that one. And now we have a situation where you have people, or I should say the government and the right in North Carolina saying, hey, if you're transgender, you can't go into the bathroom of your choice. And the federal government says, actually, no, they can go in the bathroom of their choice, and we're going to enforce that because under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, you can't discriminate based on sex, so you're discriminating here based on sex, so if you keep enforcing this law, we're going to withhold funds, and then boom, you have the two lawsuits now, where they decided to go after each other. North Carolina is ridiculous. You're going to go to fucking court over this? Transgender people, all this is transgender people saying, hey, can I go into the bathroom that aligns with my current gender? No! Whatever you were biologically born as, that's where you got to go. Okay, but wait, understand, this is what transgender people argue. Okay, but that's not my current gender, and hello, let's understand this. There's no evidence whatsoever of molesting or harassing or crimes being committed by transgender people going into the bathroom that matches up with their current gender. That just doesn't happen. And why is it that people just ignored that transgender people exist? I don't understand this. This idea that, like, all there is what your biological gender is, and that's the end of the conversation. No, it's not. There are people who are born male, and their brain is male. There are people who are born female, and their brain is female. And then also, there are small percentages of people who are born male, but their brain is female. People who are born female, but their brain is male. And then they live in accordance with that reality. In the same way that gay people exist, and they live in accordance with that reality. How, most people are born what their gender is, and they're attracted to the opposite sex. And some are born and they're attracted to the same sex. Who gives a fuck? Who cares? You have to treat them equally and with respect and dignity. And they're making the same arguments that they made back when black people were treated like this, where they say, well, why can't we just discriminate against them? You're taking them away now too? We can't discriminate against them? These are the arguments that were made all along. And they hide behind the guise of states' rights. States' rights, states' rights. We have a right to take away the rights of others, therefore piss off federal government. That's exactly what they said during segregation too. Well, why is the big bad federal government getting involved here? States' rights, states' rights. We have a right to keep blacks as second-class citizens and to segregate. Fuck off. Well, no, you don't. You don't have that right. You don't have a right to take away others' rights. So I hope the federal government wins here. They have a decent case, but it's all going to depend on the interpretation of the word sex in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. In other words, people could look at that and say, the original intent was not to include transgender people, so North Carolina wins. Or people could look at that and say, a reasonable current-day interpretation of the term sex does include transgenders and does protect their rights to go into the bathroom of their choice. So it's all going to depend, honestly, on the political leanings of whatever courts it ends up in. So when there's a more conservative-leaning justice, they'll side with North Carolina. When there's a more liberal-leaning justice, they'll side with the federal government here. But in terms of where people should fall on this, it's a no-brainer. In fact, the real crime and the real awkward situation would be if you take somebody who's, for example, a transgender woman and you make them go into the man's bathroom. Well, that's worse, because then you have a woman going into the men's bathroom. Why would you want that? Why wouldn't you want the trans woman to go into the woman's bathroom, the bathroom of their choice that matches with their current gender? It just, that, you know what it is? They're so obsessed with sex and gender, and they're so repressed that it comes out in all these weird ways. And this is where we're at right now.